Hello everyone and welcome to this third episode of our Next.js and GeNYG generator tutorials. In this video we will go through the Material UI library and also the React hook form one. So we will see how to create new components and how to put some style thanks to Material UI library, how to create some forms with some basic inputs, probably how to create new inputs as well, with thanks to the React hook form control and controlled features. And we will see in general how forms behaves with the validation, the data, also the Typescript support and everything. So let's go back to our project. The first thing to do here is to install the Material UI packages. We already introduced the fact that with our GeNYG generator, we support a packages feature, a packages architecture. And in order to use Material UI and React hook form libraries, first of all, we have to install all this library thanks to the pkg-mui package Material UI command. This command will prompt us to overwrite some of the existing files. I already ran it, so I will not do it again, but you just have to input yes to all of these overwrites. So the command again will install all the needed libraries. Some of these are the following: MUI icons material, MUI material. So these are the basic Material UI components. These are the icons. We also have the React hook form. We also have the React drop zone, because some inputs use the drop zone to import images or other kind of files in our forms. There is also the hook form resolvers that enables us to connect the React hook form validation, basic validation, with the YAP library. YAP is already pre-installed with the GeNYG. It is not installed with the package Material UI. It is already pre-installed because it's a library that we will use also in our API. So when we will develop API in the backend with Node.js, we will use YAP to validate payloads, path parameters, query strings, etc. So it is a library that we already need, but we can use both in the front end and in the backend. The package Material UI command will also create this components form, actually underscore form folder, with all of these form components. All of these are just basic Material UI components like text field, with the form on top of them. So text field becomes form text field, select becomes form select. The difference between these components and the original Material UI ones is that these components are able to connect with the React hook form. We will see that this is made thanks to the form provider and use form context hook, both from the React hook form library. Now we will also introduce the components folder. We saw in the previous tutorial that we can create pages, and for each folder, page folder inside the pages directory, it will correspond a route in our website. But what if you have to reuse some components through the different pages? Like if we have a footer or a header that is fixed between multiple pages, then we have to create a React component. And of course, reusability is one of the main principles of React. So the fact that we can create components, it is actually fundamental and mandatory in a React project. The command to create a new component is GeNYG NextComp. That is a shortcut, of course, for component. Thanks to this component, we will be actually prompted to select the folder where we want to install the component. The starting one is, of course, the /components directory, and then we can choose this directory, or we can go through another subdirectory in order to create a tree of components and subcomponents. Usually, we will just install our component inside the components root directory. Then we will have to assign this component a name. Now I will assign the name project card, and then I will show you why. And this is it. Inside our components folder, we will have our new component, in this case project card, with two files inside, the index tsx, that is actually our UI, so everything that we will display will be inside the index file, while all the business logic, so hooks and use effects, use state, every hooks that we can use, it will be inside this use project card hook and the respective index.hooks file. Since last time I introduced some components in our project in order to show and render something. So this is how it looks right now. This is the new GetUpper website. You can see that I already put here an app bar. Here there are some typographies, a background image. So slowly we are starting to migrate everything that we did in Gatsby in the new project. These components we can all find inside the index file inside pages, that is the root directory and the root route of our website actually. So I already used here some of the Material UI basic components like box, grid, or the typography. And right now in the website we have something that is actually repeating, that is this element. So we want to create a reusable component out of this behavior, this circle with the number, this title, and this description, and make, of course, a reusable component. So we can switch back to our project card, and now I will just add to this component some UI from the previous project. The basic UI here is imported, so we have a grid. Inside the grid we have an avatar that in Material UI it can represent, let's say, our profile picture, but also a logo. In this example, we will use the avatar UI to represent the index number of our service. Then we have a typography, and here we will just render a React node components that can be the description. So we can put more typography, some styling. So we have now to import these properties. So we have index, it is a number. We have the title, it is a string, and then we have the description that will be just another React node. Now, since we are using Material UI version 5, instead this component with Gatsby was created with the Material UI version 4, we have to get rid of some old styling, like this one, and leave only the things that we need. Here we will go and import our props, index name and description. So all the typings here will be fine. GeNYG for us already put some of these keywords like the display name that is mandatory during runtime for Next.js. Of course, we want to modify here the name with this title. And now we are done, definitely. Now, if we go back to our home page, we have here our main content. And we want to uncomment this piece of code. So we have this app divider and this typography with the title. The app divider again is another component that we can reuse inside the page to create this division effect here. So we just create a new component inside the root directory, app divider. I will copy the UI from the previous project, and again I have to change these class names with some styling. So how do we style with Material UI version 5? First of all, let's convert basic divs with boxes where we can apply the SX prop. Then we can define the SX, the system prop, where we can specify some styling in line. And I will just copy the previous CSS properties. So this is the width, we have a margin, a background color, height, and here we need to specify with pixel, display flex, justify content, and again for this div we will modify into boxes, and we will add inline this. 4 pixel width, for pixel radius. Perfect. Now we can use our app divider inside our home page. So let's import it. Then here as well we have our typography with this class name that we want to rename like this. And the content will be this one. And here we go. We have the divider and our new typography. So we can go back to our project and prepare everything for our new project cards. Let's put a basic container, and then we need to map our services array that we still need to create. Service project card service.index service.title service.description. And now we have to define our services. Like this. And here we can call it like this. So here we have our avatar, but as you can see, the styling is not really applied yet. And we can start to take some copy from the previous website. Here we go. So let's go back to our project card and let's add some styling. Here we go. After adding some styling to our component, now everything is starting to look much better. Okay, now we filled the services array with 1, 2, 3, and 4 services. We just watched how to create components and put some styling in line with the SX new prop. We also have an alternative to create styled components that I will suggest you to check the material UI documentation because it's really well done. But of course, we cannot ignore the themes index.tsx file. So the theme file is really important in a project based on Material UI because it allows us to standardize and to put some global style to our components. The main properties of the theme object that is then applied to all of our components is the palette object. Then we have also a typography object, and we also have the possibility to override some specific components like buttons, typographies, inputs. So by acting here in this specific file, in this specific object, we can actually put, let's say, a common style for all the components and typographies that we will use inside the projects. So we will do it once, and all these components will inherit these behaviors. And there are some properties like the palette one with the colors that will be actually inherited from different components. So we don't even go to customize the single CSS of the single component, but by specifying this primary main color, this color will actually be applied to buttons, inputs, outlines, and different papers styling, and a lot of different components in Material UI that actually uses and access this property. Again, since the theme object is quite big with a lot of different properties, I invite you to go and check the Material UI documentation because it's really well done and it offers you a great panoramic on all of these properties that you can change, and also check live on their website how these changes are applied to the different components. With the Material UI package, we also included, as we said at the beginning, all the React hook form libraries as well. So let's try to create a new form based on this library, and let's check what GeNYG offers us out of the box and how we can customize the behaviors of our forms. So first of all, I will create a new page with GeNYG Next page, as we saw during the last tutorial. I will call the page contacts, contact us. And inside our pages directory, now we'll have our contact us page here. So if we navigate to getupper localhost /contact us, we have a blank page, but the title is right, so we know that we are in the correct page. Now let's introduce the GeNYG Next form command to create a new form. Next requires us to specify the form name, so we can call it, in this case, contact form. The good practice in this case is to add the form name label at the end of the component. So contact form, sign up form, login form, etc. Now in our components folder we have the new contact form. If we open the index file, we have a new component that is really similar to a basic and empty component created with GeNYG Next comp. So let's check the main differences. First of all, in the UI, we don't have an empty div, but we have this form provider and this HTML basic form. So what are we talking about? Form provider, it is a provider from React hook form that is needed to create a context in a way that all the components, the input components that we will put inside our form can access our form data and check for values. We will see that this is really useful because our forms here in the UI will be quite easy, because all the information that our inputs need, they can be extrapolated with the use form context inside of the same component. Everything that we need to do, it is to add this provider here, and GeNYG already put it for us. So this is great. And we also have, as we said, the HTML form. We know that forms can be, let's say, they have some automatically triggers. So if inside an HTML form we have a text input and we press enter, automatically the action of that form will be triggered. So in order to, let's say, override the default behavior and apply only the business logics that we want to apply, we will have to wrap this form with this form provider, plus we will pass this specific onSubmit function. So every time the form is submitted, again, if we press enter inside an input, or if we click a button inside the form with the submit type property, this function here will be triggered instead of the default one. Now let's go and check what's inside our hook form. We can see that there is a bunch of new objects and properties and libraries included. First of all, we have the schema object. This is the YAP validation object. We will see how YAP works and how it integrates with the form in a minute. Then we have the form Typescript interface that we will use here to pass to the useForm hook from React hook form to actually create our form and to specify how the data is formed from a Typescript and object point of view. Here we pass the resolver with the YAP resolver and the schema object to specify which kind of validation we want for our form, and useForm returns this form data. It is the same passed here to the form provider, and from form data we only really need inside the hook this handle submit callback that we will pass here to the onSubmit. And when we trigger actually the submit of our form, inside of this callback we should put our business logic. So if we reach here, we know for sure that our form is correctly validated and filled. So here we can actually do everything we want with the data. This data will be in the format of contact form data. So we will receive exactly the input data inputted by our user. So let's try to create a basic form. Here we already have some example like this name string, but let's put something like, okay, let's leave this name, let's put age as a YAP number required, and we can also specify an email. Also the email as a specific validation that you can find under YAP string.email. Here we go. So this is how we want to validate our schema. Again, for more details about YAP and how it works, the validation for each specific case, I remind you to the documentation. Here instead we can specify the same object Typescript interface. So name will be a string, age will be a number, and email, it is again a string. So again, here inside our data, we will find all of these variables, age, email, and name, and here we can dispatch an action, send this to our API, but we will see this later when we introduce AJAX calls and of course API. So let's go back inside our UI, because now it is time to specify how we want our user to input this data that we just declared. So for our name, it will be needed just a form text field with the name and the label name. We can do the same for our age and email. For the age, we can specify that our input is actually a number with the type number. Now we can import our form inside of our page. So let's create a box first with width 100%, height as well, and some padding. And now we can import our contact form. So let's see now how our contact form looks like. This is it. It is working. We have the input number and the name and email strings. We can make it a little bit more beautiful with some Material UI stuff. Like we can add a stack with some spacing. Let's just put a max width, and here we go. Now we can also add a button. A simple Material UI button will be enough. And what we just need to do is to specify type submit. Here we go. When we click on the button, actually the validation is triggered, because remember that this type submit will trigger this on submit since the button is inside this form, and the on submit function is actually relying on the handle submit from React Hook form. So the first time that we submit our form, the validation properties, the validation object is triggered, all the inputs are checked, and in this case we can see that we have some issue. For instance, name, error message, and email. Email is a required field. In this case, error message is this one. So we can override the default message with this, like name is required, as well for the email. Please specify an email. And here we go. The two error messages are updated. Now, as soon as I input something here and something here, you can see that now this is okay, but this is triggering an error because email must be a valid email. And again, this is the default error message coming from this one. So here we can specify an error message, probably in Italian. And here we go with the updated error message. If I put something valid, now the form behaves correctly, and this handle submit here is triggered. Of course, here we are not doing anything, so we cannot see what is going on, but we can put an alert just to check that everything is working, like this. Submit. So basically the main connection and the only connection between our form text field and the form that we just created, it is this name variable. Thanks to this name variable, we connect our inputs to the form and we specify which kind of property we want to handle with this specific instance of the component. So this will be the name, this will handle the age, this will handle the email. So all of these will be used to check the validation. But how these components work? Well, for instance, the form text field 1, it just imports text field from Material UI and the controller from React Hook form. Again, there is the documentation about controlling in the React Hook form documentation, so you can give a look if something should not be clear. Thanks to this controller and to the hook use form context, we can actually access this control variable and the errors, and inside our text field we can pass the control variable to the controller component and actually control this piece of UI that is our Material UI text field with the variable passed here in the render function. So the controller is the component that helps us to have access to the onChange and value variables. The control is the object identifying which form in our application this instance of the component is handling, and this is done automatically thanks to the form provider. So this use form context will actually access the form provider that will find as a parent, since this is a React context at the end, and it will automatically retrieve the control object controlling that form, that is this one. So the connection is this form provider passing all the form data, and inside our form text field use form context accessing this control variable. The control then is passed to our UI here, passed to our controller here with the name. This is really important. This name is the one that we declared here, and it is the only variable that is actually specifying which kind of input we are dealing with. And thanks to the onChange and value variable, we are actually controlling and also getting new values from our input. But not only we are actually getting the value and also setting the value when there is a change with the onChange event, but we are also setting the error and the helper text properties to our text field. So whenever there is an errors in our errors object in our form for that specific name, for that specific variable and field, then we will show the error state with also an error message. That is exactly what we are doing here. So this red inside the text field is given because that error flag is true, and this error message here, it is shown because of this helper text here. This is something that we use frequently in also other components. We also have other components, as we said, like form select, that mostly works all of these in a similar way. So there is a controller component who takes the control, and then there is a value and onChange variables that will help us to show the current value in our form, but also to actually set and trigger the change of that field based on some user interaction. So whenever here, for example, the user will select a new value from the select dropdown, the new value will be set in our form. Again, we have a bunch of these form components that you can try to play with: checkboxes, chips fields, date picker, date time picker. There is also the radio group, and probably we will add more and more in the next future. Of course, you can also add and create new form components. Everything that you need to do, it is actually to create a new component, add the controller with the control and the name properties, and from the hook file, you just have to get this piece of information. Control, it is the most important to connect this component to the form provider, wrapping it, and if you'd like, also adding these errors here to show in case the validation on that specific input doesn't match what you specified in the schema object.